Well, if it's just skeletons and zombies we can deal with them. Still, it's a pain to take out skeletons with a spear. I think the most troublesome ones are the whites. For me it's the skeleton centipedes. I'd be dead by now if the adventurers standing guard nearby didn't chase them away from me. Skeleton centipedes? I heard that the powerful undead only show up when you let the weak ones get away. So all you need to do is kill them all when they're weak, and the strong undead won't appear. Yes, that's right. The captain chewed out the squad patrolling the graveyard last week. While it's nice to have them by around for us, I'd rather not have to go through that sort of thing again. Still, when I think about it, I've got a bad feeling about the lack of undead right now. Why's that? I just feel like we might have missed something out during our watches. You're thinking too much. There aren't that many undead normally. They say that they only pop up frequently, when they bury the corpses of the people who died while fighting the Empire. So on the flip side, this is what happens when there aren't any big wars, right? The soldiers nodded to each other in agreement. They had buried human corpses in their own villages, but they had never heard of the undead appearing that often. So that means the Katsa Plains must be pretty insane. Yeah, didn't they say something about an unimaginably strong undead creature showing up? It was a place where the Empire and the Kingdom clashed in fierce battles. It was also a place famous for the proliferation of its undead. Adventurers hired by the Kingdom and Imperial Knights would often go there to hunt down the undead. This task was important enough that the Empire and Kingdom's support corps had built small towns nearby to support their personnel. I heard a guard who was about to speak suddenly shut his mouth. Another guard, who felt easy about this, spoke up, "Oi, don't scare me, quiet." The silent guard looked straight at the graveyard, as though he could see through the darkness. Following this, the other guards turned to look at the graveyard one after the other. Didn't you hear it? Were you imagining things? Though I didn't hear the wind blowing or the grass moving, I think I can smell dirt. Didn't they dig a few graves just now? It smells just like it did then. Come on, don't joke about this sort of thing. Oi. Look over there. One of the guards pointed to the graveyard, and everyone else looked toward the spot he was pointing at. Two guards were sprinting for the doors. Both of them panted heavily, their eyes bloodshot, and their sweat-slick hair stuck to their foreheads. A growing sense of dread filled the other guards as they saw this. Guard patrols in the graveyard moved in groups of at least 10. Why were there only 2 people here? Judging by the way they had no weapons and were running for dear life, they had panicked and fled. Open up. Hurry up and open the doors. Upon seeing the 2 men shouting in front of the doors, the guards hurriedly ran down the stairs and let them through. Before the doors could even swing fully open, the 2 guards forced their way in. They collapsed to the ground but kept scrabbling on. What the hell? The 2 pale-faced guards who had just escaped the graveyard interrupted their questioners, panting and shouting, "Close the doors. Quickly." This strange behavior sent a chill down the spine of the other guards. Working together, they pushed the doors shut and barred them. What happened? What about the others? As they heard this question, a haunted look appeared on the guards' frightened faces. They were eaten by the undead. Upon realizing that 8 of their fellows had lost their lives, the guards immediately turned to their captain. He immediately ordered, "Oi, one of you go upstairs and take a look." A guard hurriedly climbed the stairs, but halfway up, he froze in place. What happened? The trembling guard shouted, "The undead. The undead are everywhere." If one listened carefully, they would be able to make out a sound which sounded like 10,000 horses galloping, coming from the other side of the wall. Everyone, not just the guard from just now, were struck dumb by the scene before them. A massive quantity of undead, so great as to render all who saw it speechless, approached the doors of the graveyard. Why in such numbers? Looks like it's more than 100 or 200, there should be 1,000 of them, or more. The magical lights illuminated countless undead, like shadows writhing in the dark, and it was difficult to get an exact count. Wreathed in the scent of rot, the shambling mass of undead pressed in toward the doors like gathering clouds. It was not just zombies and skeletons down there. There were also a few rarer and more powerful undead, ghouls, ghasts, wights, swell skins, corrupt dead, and more. The guards could not help their shivering. Because the graveyard was surrounded by a wall, the undead could not attack the common folk as long as the wall held out. However, even if they mobilized all their guards, it was doubtful whether they could fend off such a massive horde of the undead. The guards were essentially normal citizens, and they had no confidence in wiping out these undead. In addition, some undead could turn their slain victims into others of their own kind. If things went poorly, the guards might end up becoming undead themselves and attacking their fellows. And while they had not seen any flying undead yet, the guards had a bad feeling that if they did not wipe them all out, a flying undead creature would end up spawning sooner or later. The undead tide washed up against the side of the wall. Doom. Doom. The swarming, mindless undead had no sense of pain, and banged wildly against the doors. It was as if they knew that they could attack the living if they broke the doors down. Doom. Doom. The sounds of repeated pounding, and the constant moans of the dead came from the other side of the door. They did not need siege rams. The undead, who did not care if their bodies were destroyed by their non-stop battering, were siege weapons in their own right. Cold sweat broke out on the backs of the guards who saw this. Ring the bell. Ask for help from the barracks. You too, go inform the other doors about this. The captain, who had recovered his senses by now, continued giving orders. The ones behind, take your spears and stab the undead getting close to the doors. The guards remembered their duty as they heard the orders, and they started thrusting savagely at the undead below them. The undead covered the land like a flood, so any stroke of theirs found a home in undead flesh. They thrust, withdrew, and thrust again. Tainted blood spilled over the ground, while the guards' noses were soon inured to the stench of decay. They repeated the same motions over and over again like workers. They killed several undead, which fell to the ground and were trampled to paste by the ones behind them. Because the undead had little intelligence, they did not strike against the guards stabbing at them with their spears. Repeating the same simple actions eroded the guards' sense of danger. And then, as though aiming for that moment, Ueawa! A scream pierced the air. As the other guards turned to look, they saw something long and wriggly curled around another guard's neck. It was a slimy, pink object, an intestine. The creature that had shot forth this length of intestine was an egg-shaped undead creature, with a huge cavity on the front of its body. Within that cavity were several people's worth of internal organs, churning and wriggling like parasites. This undead creature was called an organ egg. The writhing intestine pulled at the guard's body. Hiya! Before his friends could save him, the guard wailed and fell. Save me. Someone save me. Aguwa! His screams filled the air. Every guard saw the terrible fate of their colleague, eaten alive by the throng of undead. The armor which protected his body, and his attempts to protect his face only prolonged his suffering. His fingers, his calves, his face, all of them were picked clean. Fall back. Get down from the wall. After seeing the organ egg's innards twitching, the guard captain ordered a retreat. All the guards hurriedly ran down the stairs, and they could hear the sounds of the undead banging at the doors getting louder. The doors themselves began groaning under the strain. The sense of doom grew stronger. The chances of them holding out until help arrived, or that no other strong undead would show up, were very low. Once the doors opened, the tide of death would flood in, and only the gods knew how many lives would be lost. Just as the guards were fully consumed by despair, there was a clattering of metal. Everyone reflexively looked to the source of the sound. Before their eyes was a magical beast whose round black eyes gleamed with intelligence, and a warrior in full plate armor. Beside them was a beautiful woman who seemed completely mismatched to the pair. Oi! This place is very dangerous. Get out of. Halfway through the guard's words, he realized that there was a metal plate dangling from the warrior's neck. An adventurer. However, that ember of hope was snuffed out when he saw that it was a copper plate. Adventurers of the lowest class could not possibly deliver them from this dilemma. A look of disappointment appeared in the eyes of all the guards present. The warrior nimbly dismounted his beast. There was no sense of clumsiness in his movements. "Didn't you hear me? Get out of here now. Nabe my sword." The warrior's voice was softer than the guards' shouting, but it was surprisingly resonant even through the clamor of the swarming undead. The beautiful woman approached the warrior, and drew a great sword from his back. "Look behind you. It's dangerous, right?" The guards turned around in response to the warrior's words, and they looked upon their doom. They saw a shape which was taller than the 4-meter-high walls. It was a necrosome giant, a gigantic undead creature made of countless corpses. Yuwa, just as the guards screamed and prepared to flee, a strange sight appeared before them. The warrior from just now raised his sword in a javelin thrower's stance. What was he doing? In the next moment, that question vanished like mist in sunlight. The warrior hurled his sword with unbelievable speed. The guards hurriedly looked where the sword had flown, and there they saw an even more incredible sight. The necrosome giant, that vast, seemingly invincible undead creature, staggered back like it had been hit in the head by an even larger foe, before collapsing to the ground. A thunderous crash provided the proof that the gigantic creature had been knocked down. "These undead are in the way." With that, the dark warrior drew his other greatsword and advanced. "Open up." The guards did not seem to have understood what the warrior said. They blinked several times before they finally managed to parse the warrior's words. Don't be foolish. There's a whole crowd of undead on the other side of the door. So? What does that matter to me, Mammon?" Faced by the absolute confidence of the dark warrior, all of the guards were shaken to the core, and they could not respond. "Well, if you won't open up, it can't be helped. I'll go over there myself." The warrior broke into a sprint and kicked off the stone floor, vanishing over the other side of the wall. He had leapt over a 4-meter-high wall in a single bound, and while wearing full plate too. It was a scene that barely seemed real at all. The guards could not bring themselves to believe the events which had just occurred. Each of them continued staring slack-jawed at the place where Mammon had been. The beautiful woman floated into the sky from her original position. She looked like she would cross the wall like that, but then a voice halted her. "A moment, please. Please bring this one with you." The voice came from the mighty beast which the warrior from just now had ridden here. Its voice was as awe-inspiring as its appearance. The beautiful girl's brows furrowed slightly, not that it damaged her looks at all, and responded to the beast, "Climb the stairs over there. You should still be able to move after falling from a height like this, right?" "Of course. This one must rush to his master's side." "Wait for this one, my lord." The massive creature shot past the guards and nimbly bounded up the stairs. It hopped over the wall and landed on the other side. Now all was silence. They stared with open mouths and stunned eyes for a while, as though a typhoon had just swept past them. The first guard to recover spoke in a voice that trembled uncontrollably. "Oi, do you hear it?" "Hear what?" "The sounds of the undead." Even though they strained their ears to listen, they could not hear anything. It was as though a veil of silence had been drawn across the land. The constant sound of the undead pounding on the doors from just now was nowhere to be found. The frightened guards muttered, "Oi, did that actually happen?" That warrior, there were undead like that, and so many of them, and he broke right through them, went straight ahead. They were filled with equal parts shock and awe. The reason why the noise had stopped was because the nearby undead had been drawn away by a new target. Given that the sound still had not returned, it implied that they were still fighting and had not returned. This unbelievable scenario drew the guards to the top of the walls to satisfy their curiosity. They could not believe what they saw from up there, and they muttered, "What is this? That warrior, what kind of a man is he?" Countless bodies littered the ground. Mountains of corpses were everywhere, covering the entire graveyard. Although some of the undead hung on to a thread of unlife and struggled weakly to move, All of them had lost the ability to fight. The smell of decay floated over as they expected, and they heard the sounds of distant battle. No way, he's still fighting? All these undead, strong ones too, and he could actually break through them. Incredible. Who was that warrior anyway? He called himself Mammon, I think, but calling someone with skills like that a copperplate is too much of a joke. He should be one of those legendary adventurers with an adamantite plate, right? The others quietly voiced their approval. Someone like that could not be a mere copperplate adventurer. He should be someone who possessed a plate made of the highest ranked of all metals, in other words, a hero. There was no other possibility. Perhaps we just saw a man of legend, a dark warrior, no, a dark hero. Everyone else could not help but nod in response to that. Diamond suit, diamond suit, diamond suit. When his right hand moved, the undead were flung away. When his left hand struck, the undead were cut in two. Ains, a tornado of death which killed everything it touched, finally ground to a halt. What bothersome pests. Ains had recreated his great swords with magic, and now he held them in both hands. He looked on the undead around him with an exasperated expression on his face, and then pointed a greatsword caked in vile fluids at them. The undead recoiled at this and tried to flee Ains. The undead should not have known the meaning of fear, yet they had come to fear Ains. This one apologizes deeply for this one's actions. The sound came from high above Ains. The wise king of the forest floated in mid-air, limbs spread. Its whiskers drooped down, and its voice sounded equally lifeless. However, the person who responded was not Ains. You settle down up there. It's hard to carry you when you squirm. Narbrel's voice came from the belly of the wise king of the forest. It was not flying, but rather Narbrel, who had cast the flight spell on herself, was carrying it. She was halfway buried into the wise king of the forest's fur. My deepest apologies. The unintelligent undead had not attacked Ains when he appeared. This was because they could perceive life force, and they sensed that Ains was of the same kind as they. However, the same did not apply to the life force of the wise king of the forest behind him. This resulted in a chaotic battle which drew Ains in, and the wise king of the forest was thus carried up by Narbrel lest the undead touch it. With every step Ains took forward, the undead took one back. They encircled him in this way while keeping their distance from him. This circle moved with Ains' steps. Although the undead seemed to be looking for a chance to attack, any who stepped forward were immediately destroyed by Ains. Therefore, the undead merely surrounded him, but did not make a move on him. Countless undead had already been annihilated by Ains when they carelessly strayed too close to Ains. Even the mindless undead had learned something from this, which was why they had chosen to surround him. Still, if this keeps up, it'll only be a stalemate, Ains grumbled as he saw the huge throng of undead that still remained. If he wanted to break the encirclement, he could easily cut a path through the undead horde. However, if he forced his way through, the undead would scatter in all directions, and the nearby guards might end up being injured or killed. If that happened, he would lose the witnesses to his deeds, and thus fail the objective of being the adventurer who cleared up this matter. Therefore, he had to lure the undead to him as he moved forward, in order to ensure the safety of the guards. However, doing so made his forward progress very slow. And then, Narbrel responded in earnest to Ains' words, should we summon reinforcements from Nazarick? A couple dozen people could annihilate everything in this graveyard that dares stand against you, Ains Sama. Don't be silly. How many times have I told you our objective for coming to this city? But, Ains Sama, if we wanted to win fame, would it not be better to let the undead surge into the city and cause more casualties first before stepping in? I have considered that possibility as well. If we knew our enemy's aim, this city's fighting power, and so on, we might be able to do that. But since we lack information, we need to avoid losing this chance. It would also be very annoying to have to dance to the opposition's tune. In addition, from what I can see, other teams might snatch away our glory first. I see. Ains Sama, you are truly incredible. To think your plan was so immaculately conceived, I expected nothing less of our supreme ruler. I bow before your superior wisdom once more. Speaking of which, your foolish vassal would like to be enlightened on one point. Would it not be better to send the 8 edge assassins, shadow demons, and other vassals adept at hiding themselves